mean, if you don't leave an audience teary-eyed, laughing, emoting some emotion, you have not done your job.
Justin Kolb has been playing piano since he was 4 years old. He's 82 now and still practices almost every day. This time of year, he offers intimate house concerts called From the Bench, where he showcases music by living American composers and what he calls music that lives in undeserved obscurity. I visited Justin at his home in Fleischmann's, where he cooked me an omelet and recounted a life behind the piano.
Cat's Cast is supported by the Mountain Eagle, covering Delaware, Greene, and Schoharie counties, including brands for the local region such as the Wyndham Weekly, Schoharie News, Cobleskill Herald, and Catskills Chronicle. For more information, call 518-763-6854 or email mountaineaglenews@gmail.com.
In Justin and Barbara Kolb's Fleischmann's home, Justin whipped up a deluxe omelet with toast and coffee, and we began our interview in the kitchen where he recounted a formative memory in Hammond, Indiana.
I lived in Hammond, Indiana, in the shadow of Chicago. I was 4 years old, and my parents took me to a band concert of the local high school. This kid gets up in the concert and plays a piece that I now know is called Bumble Boogie. Everybody goes nuts over this high school kid playing Bumble Boogie. And it turns out we all learned that his mother was his teacher.
And so Justin's parents signed him up for lessons.
Well, I was 4. And I didn't mind doing what they made me do. And then somebody suggested that I should get another teacher. And she was very contest conscious, and she was a masterful teacher. I would enter these contests and win. And then she entered me into a higher level competition for pianists. And the prize was 2 appearances with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I was 11. I auditioned for the famous, legendary Fritz Reiner. I got on stage and played for him. He's sitting down there in the audience, and nobody was there except his assistant. And I finished playing what I played, and he motioned me over. He said, "You like play with orchestra?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Okay, talk to him," his assistant, George Schick. Schick was great, and Schick went on to relocate to New York City and became head of the Manhattan School of Music. The prize was twice with them. There's a backstory. I won a contest where I first played with the Gary, Indiana Symphony Orchestra. When I practiced at my teacher's house, she had 2 grands, and she brought in a high school girl, and I suppose she was 16. And she would play the orchestra part. And so I would go ba ba da ya ba 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 da yum, and then I'd stop and she would go bum ba da yum, and I go ba ba da yum, and she'd imitate that. And together we'd both go ba 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 da yum, and this was a Haydn D major concerto. I had at that point never heard an orchestra. I had won this contest. I got $25, which was big money for a 10-year-old, and a medal. I think I still have the medal. We rehearsed in a church basement. It smelled. They had a beat-up upright piano. I start, bum, ba-da-yum, ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-da-yum, and the strings go bum, ba-da-yum, and I go bum, bum, and they go bum, bum. And then together we go ba-ba-ba-da-yum. Well, the sound was like a locomotive was crashing through that church basement. It was awesome. It was powerful. And I'm not making this story up because I remember it vividly. That's when I decided I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. This is great. This is power. And I did. And it was because of that rehearsal that I became a pianist.
2 decades later, military service would find Justin Kolb in Germany, where the dream of becoming a concert pianist was still top of mind. Here's Justin, juggling breakfast prep and storytelling.
64 to 69, I was in 5 years. Yeah, I was hot, not with desire. I was just ripe to get assigned to NAM. I spent 2 years in the States and 3 years in Europe. And then at the end of the European tour, my CO, he called me in and said, "What do you intend to do when you get out of here?" And I said, "I'm going to be a concert pianist." And I was studying with a coach in Heidelberg. And he said, "Yeah, I heard that." I said, "How come I don't know this?" "And why aren't you in the 7th Army Soldiers Chorus as an accompanist?" And I said, "Because I didn't want to tell my kids when they say, 'What did you do in the Army?' I didn't want to say I was in the band." So instead, I half chickened out. I got in personnel administration, and it was a great job. It taught me how the world really works as far as organizational behavior, organizational structure. So then the colonel, who was bucking for general and ended up retiring with 2 stars, he said, "Well, I'm going to have you presented by myself or the State Department in your European debut. What do you think of that?" And I said, "Well, I think that that sounds too delicious to be true." I said, "I better check with my wife." He said, "Well, that's smart." He said, what are your hours?" And I had guys working under me. I had a big job as far as personnel goes for a 7,000 man unit, and that was spread across Western Europe. I said, "Well, I normally work 8 to 5 unless we're out in the field on an exercise." I said, "I'll come to work at 7 and leave at 3. He said, "Can you handle that?" And I said, "I got good guys working for me, yes. And if there's something important, I'm not stupid. I'll go Army first and piano second." So I was excited about this debut. It was great. And he cut a deal for me with the State Department. So that at the end of my tour, I just started playing concerts. I had USIS and State Department limos. I mean, I had a private plane in Iran where I played 10 recitals. So I was on tour for a year in which I played more than once a week. My very first formal concert tour, I did 21 cities within 22 nights in Italy. My deal with the State Department is they had to guarantee it. I said, "I don't know how you guys are going to do it, but I'm not doing it unless there are critics in the audience." At the end of a year, Barbara wrote all the concert agents, 10 agents in New York City. And all the agents wrote back. Most of their letters were boilerplate. "Sorry, we have too many pianists on board. We will not even audition you. Stay in Europe, you've got it made." Well, we had these 2 kids. The grandparents had never seen one of them. He was the Heidelberger, and Barbara was pregnant. So I was released from the Army, and I had no choice really other than to go to graduate school. So I went to Northwestern outside of Chicago in Evanston. I ended up in the world of business for 20 years. During the 20 years, I found myself in sales roles more than anything. And success to me at the time was a 2-week vacation and maybe a couple of grand at the end of the year for a bonus.
And then came an opportunity to own and operate a cellular telephone company.
We looked at a number of businesses and we made a decision, and our goal was to be able to retire to do what our passion was in 10 years. So we had some unique ideas, and I flipped the company 6.5 years later to a large, smaller telephone operation that was getting into cellular. And I even had a Mercedes at the time. That was fun. It's fun to have money. The money's gone. I look forward to Social Security. I hope I'm able to keep getting Social Security checks. But I have no regrets. It was fun, and I'm the luckiest guy I know. I beat stage 4 throat cancer. I'm nursing low-level leukemia right now, but it's not life-threatening. And I have no aches or pains. And Barbara's healthy as a horse. Our 3 kids all have great marriages and solid jobs. So life, I'm just very lucky.
Okay, so back to the Catskills chapter of this story. After Justin retired from that stint in cellular and the kids were grown, Justin and Barbara headed up to Fleischman's, New York, for a house of their own.
We decided it was time that we should own something and not live in rental houses. We came up here, and after a year of building some stone walls and reinforcing others and clearing an orchard, and of course we were financially secure, but it wasn't that as much as it was the kids were gone. They were out of college on their own, and we just had a blast. After about a year of goofing off, at which everybody should be given this opportunity, Barbara said, "When are you going to start practicing again?" And I wisely said, I don't know if I was serious. I said, "I'll start practicing when you learn how to book concerts." So she found 2 women in the city who were concert agents. The sisterhood was active. They took her to showcases and showed her how to book concerts. We broke it down. Okay, let's do a concert, 1 a month, and we'll do them for free. Well, Barbara booked 12, and then the next year we charged expenses, and then someone said, "You guys are totally ignorant what you could be doing." So we started with reasonable fees, and it was great. We went all over the country. I ended up playing as far away as Budapest and Novi Sad, Serbia, to as far west as Santa Barbara.
Justin's post-retirement piano career would take him to New York's most prestigious concert halls, and he'd garner glowing reviews from the likes of the New York Times and the Washington Post.
I've got 3 CDs, and I'm very pleased with them, but my colleagues have 30.
Well, you can't look at too closely at what other people are doing. You'll never be satisfied.
You're right. And so I'm booking less concerts. It's much harder since COVID. I have a friend who's a composer. He got 88 million hits on 1 track of electronic music. Spotify gave him $300. And so the business is all mixed up. So Barbara said, "Let's do concerts here," because I had done, I think, 34 fundraiser concerts here and attracted an audience, but it was because of the cause, and I was scared to death. So we put together a mailing list, and I invited them, and that was 8 years ago, and every single concert has sold out. Just blows my mind.
Here, at your house.
In my house. And I call it From the Bench, Concerts with Commentary. I tell war stories from being on tour. You know, stories like the time I had drinks with Aaron Copland.
My wife Rebecca and I got to hear that story at a recent From the Bench performance at Justin's house, where Copland was one of 5 composers on the program. To Justin's left, turning pages of the score, as she's been doing for some 6 decades, was Justin's wife, Barbara. Here's how he introduced her that afternoon.
The person behind me is my first wife. Her name is Barbara. And it's curious because in our 1960 high school yearbook, the year we graduated, there's a photo of Barbara and me dancing, and it says, J.C. Kolb and his favorite page turner. Barbara has turned pages at Lincoln Center, at the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, Weill Recital Hall at Carnegie, and the From the Bench concert series in the Catskills.
That piano Justin plays is a 9-foot concert grand. with its own interesting story.
I lucked out with this piano. It is a Steinway knockoff. And this company, Steinert, was actually on the board of Steinway and friends of the family. And the guy took advantage of them. He was a piano manufacturer, Mr. Steinert. He ripped off some of their technologies. They took him to court, and he was prohibited from making 9-footers and 7-footers in perpetuity.
That legal ruling must have come down after Justin's 9-footer was built.
I got a good deal on a 7-footer prior to moving up here. We went back, and I gave him his check, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I want to show you." And I had seen it, and it was this piano. And I said, I said, "I'm happy with 7-footer. I'm not going to give you any more money."
But then he heard the piano.
I mean, it's great. You know, you can't beat that. And yet it has the ability to project even though I play quietly. You cannot play that softly, consistently, quietly, unless you have a great technician, and it's got to be the same technician. And I use Serge Ivanov, local to Kingston. He's a fabulous piano technician, and it's got to have quick reaction also. Touch and feel is very important to me and should be to all pianists. I don't like the trite expression, it's got to be an extension of myself, but it does. And I just love this piano. I'm very blessed to have it. And I have a backup if Serge decides he's going off to Bermuda for vacation and I need somebody. I use Ray Jackson, who is also in Kingston. Ray is a wonderful technician. And there's a big difference between tuners and technicians.
Whittling an interview down to a 20 or 25-minute podcast is a perpetual challenge. But Justin had so many interesting stories about his life with the piano that this episode was a particularly difficult exercise in distillation. This next story, however, tracing his education in piano all the way back to a teacher named Beethoven. Yes, that Beethoven just had to make the cut.
I have studied with a lot of teachers, really fabulous pedagogues. I studied for about 10 years with Herman Diaz, and he was from Havana, and he studied with a great pianist by the name of Claudio Arrau. Arrau studied with Martin Krauss. Krauss studied with Franz Liszt. Liszt studied with Carl Czerny, and Czerny was the most famous student of Beethoven. So I tell kids, and if I'm doing a little music appreciation class for anybody, adults love this. I've done it during my concert. I do a flip chart and I say, okay, does everybody agree that I'm your teacher during this hour? Yes, we all agree. So I draw a little smiley face. This is me. I'm your teacher. I have a teacher, Mr. Diaz. He had a teacher. I say, so you all can go home and tell your parents that for 1 hour of your life, you were 8th generation students of Beethoven. Accurate or inaccurate, malarkey or not, we believe that this is important.
You've been playing piano for 78 years?
Yes. You'd think I would be better.
How important is practice now?
4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Now?
It's critical. it's critical if I want to make real music. I mean, learning the notes is nothing. Certainly, with my experience, you can sight read almost everything slowly. But to make real music, to talk to the audience, all these curved lines on a music score, you get used to seeing them so much you forget what they mean. But when a composer writes a curved line over a group of notes, those are called phrases. They're systems, and you must put these systems together. It starts with a sentence, and then there's two sentences. I do a lot of visualization. So my visualization is, here's what happened to me. And in this case, it's really sort of mournful. And then someone answers, oh, no. Well, not only that, but this happened to me also. Oh, this is terrible. So it's question and answer. Now, this is both a generalization and oversimplification, but this is how I do it. And people respond. I mean, if you don't leave an audience teary-eyed, laughing, emoting some emotion, you have not done your job. Your job is to listen to this one, And sometimes during concerts in the middle of a piece, I'll go, isn't this delicious? And people laugh and they always agree. What I'm doing isn't sacred, but the intent of music might be sacred. I'm not sure about that, but that's how I look at it.
If you'd like a spot at one of Justin's From the Bench home concerts, which I'd characterize as semi-private, the best place to start is at justinkolb.com. No guarantees, of course, but maybe mention Cat's Cast on the contact form, and if you got this far into the episode, he'll know you're genuinely interested. Cat's Cast, the Catskills podcast, is a bi-weekly production of Silver Hollow Audio. Please consider joining our monthly member listeners like Cindy, DGB, Alan, and Donna. Click the support tab at catscast.com to learn more. And if you'd like to join us as a business sponsor, get in touch. You can reach me directly through our contact form. That's at catscast.com/contact. If you like the show, please rate and review so more people can find us. I'm Brett Barry. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.